Now with the latest ITV News in the border region with Ian Payne and Amy Lee.
Hello, welcome to Lookaround, half an hour of news and sport for the ITV border region. On the programme tonight.
Plans for strengthening flood defences go on show to try and prevent further scenes like this in an Eden market town.
We knew it was coming, but it seemed forever before it arrived. And then when it did arrive in the middle of the night, which it always does, it was frightening because you woke up to your house under 3 foot of water.
Also, concerns over the scrapping of vaccine passports in England from Cumbria's Director of Public Health.
I think they could have been a useful tool in helping to stop the transmission further, particularly in those younger age groups.
And how cycling is now pedal powering southern Scotland's economy.
Hello, welcome to a new week on Lookaround. Thank you for your company. First tonight, plans for a new pumping station to reduce the risk of flooding in Appleby have been unveiled.
The town was badly hit during Storm Desmond, and the Environment Agency says a public drop-in session this evening is an ideal opportunity for people to find out more about its proposals for minimising the impact of future floods. Well, Ralph Blunton joins us in Appleby now. Ralph.
Yes, I'm standing by the River Eden behind me. This is the river, of course, that runs right the way through Appleby. Now, the issue is that when the Eden overflows, so Appleby goes underwater. The degree to which the river overflows affects how much of Appleby is underwater. Back at Storm Desmond, it was particularly bad. Now, the plan from the Environment Agency is to build a pumping station on this field just by a recycling site over there by the main floodgates. We'll be speaking to the Environment Agency in a moment to find out more about their plans. But first, just to remind ourselves how bad things were here 6 years ago, I've been hearing from the people of Appleby.
So we have these panels and they just slot into the doors, and then you tighten them up once they're in. So you slot them down. They then each level up, you slot them in. When you shut the door, you tighten it from the inside and it protects maybe. It seals into the door frame.
Lauren Budd explaining the flood prevention measures installed on her house following Storm Desmond 6 years ago. Her home is near the town centre. It was severely damaged by the waters.
I came home from a weekend away down south, and obviously I couldn't get back into my property for about 40 hours maybe, so I went and stayed in a local hotel. When I did get back, everything downstairs completely gone. I had to move out for 9 months, so the house was renovated for those 9 months. So I went into temporary accommodation with all my downstairs furniture. Well, I had no downstairs furniture, adjust my upstairs furniture, replaced everything downstairs.
Much of Appleby was underwater during Storm Desmond. It caused extensive damage to a large number of properties, businesses and homes underwater. The River Eden, which runs through Appleby, burst its banks. People here will tell you this town floods regularly, but the scenes here 6 years ago show the floodwaters at their worst. Faye Jowett has lived in Appleby for 18 years. Floodwaters reached 3 feet in her house.
It was frightening in Desmond because it was a long wait. We knew it was coming, but it seemed forever before it arrived. And then when it did arrive in the middle of the night, which it always does, it was frightening because you woke up to your house under 3 foot of water downstairs.
Now, you woke up to noises, didn't you? It was making noises. Tell me about that.
Well, I heard a bang and a crash, and I couldn't make out what it was. Came down the stairs, paddled through into here. It was then up to my knees. And it was the fridge freezer from the kitchen bouncing into the rest of the furniture in the kitchen, which was starting to float. And that's what it was.
Drive around Appleby and you'll see ribbons on the sides of pipework showing the levels of floodwater. The Environment Agency say a new pumping station here should help to reduce that risk. Well, joining me is Peter Miles from the Environment Agency. We're by the main floodgates here in Appleby. at the spot where this pumping station is proposed to be built. Tell us what's happening today.
Well, today we're at the public hall on Boroughgate in Appleby, showing the public residents around Appleby the latest design for the pumping station that we're going to be building starting next year.
Now, we've seen some of the designs. We've been into the hall, looked at some of the designs. Explain to me, how is all of this going to work? How's it going to ameliorate flooding here?
What it will do is we have a culvert bottom of Doomgate, centre of Appleby, that at the moment surcharges. The water can't get away into the Eden. We're going to be putting a new culvert in from there, bringing it around to this car park at Broad Close here, a brand new pumping station here that will pump water out into the Eden, which will stop that frequent flooding that currently happens.
One of the issues I've been hearing from people around the town today is they're saying, oh, very well having a pumping station, but it's in effect just pumping water from one place to another. If the Eden's already overflowing, what's the point of putting flood water back there?
Well, the issue we've got here with the culvert in Doomgate is actually that floods before Appleby itself and the defences in Appleby. So we do have defences in Appleby designed to a 1 in 75 year level. The culvert at the bottom of Doomgate floods much more frequently than that. So what this will do is take that water through the new culvert to the pumping station and out to the Eden long before the Eden is coming over the defences.
OK, that's fine. Thank you very much for your time today. Just to let you know that the plan is for, obviously, planning application is the first stage. Work here should start sometime in spring next year.
OK, Ralph Blunson in Appleby, very important to the residents there. Thank you very much for the update. A 38-year-old man has been charged after a stabbing incident in Alston on Saturday evening. It happened outside the Victoria Inn shortly after 8:20 p.m. The victim, who's in his 30s, was stabbed in the stomach and was taken to the Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle. He remains in hospital in a critical but stable condition.
And a protest has been held in Alston to protest against plans for removing the community ambulance. It's been operating there for nearly 50 years, serving an area with 2,500 people. The North West Ambulance Service says the current staff aren't trained to a high enough standard to keep the service running, but campaigners say it's a vital resource.
Well, I think Alston, if you look at it geographically, it is in the middle of nowhere. Winter's a particular issue, particularly it's a difficult place to get in and out of, and it's a popular area in terms of the tourism. It's a good cycle coast-to-coast route, and a lot of people sort of use it for that. There's a lot of motorbikes come through here, a lot of tourists hiking and that thing, and just having that local provision is needed.
Tributes have been paid in St Abbs today to a long-serving member of the village's lifeboat team. 64-year-old John Wilson served with them for more than 40 years. On the 27th of August, Aberdeen Coast Guard were alerted to reports of a fisherman having fallen overboard off the Berwickshire coast. Mr Wilson was transferred by helicopter to Edinburgh Royal Infirmary, where he died. Next tonight, and Cumbria's Director of Public Health has said that he's disappointed at the UK's government response to dropping its plans to introduce so-called vaccine passports.
Our political correspondent Tom Sheldrick is at Westminster for us. Tom, there has been a change of direction from ministers on this, hasn't there?
Yes, Ian, this is about having to prove that you've had 2 doses of a coronavirus vaccine in order to get into a nightclub or a large event like a concert or a big sporting fixture. That will be a requirement from next month in Scotland, and it was the plan for England too. But now, as you say, UK government ministers have said that they will not be going ahead with vaccine passports after all. They've been described as discriminatory by critics, but Cumbria's Director of Public Health, Colin Cox, has said he's disappointed at this move.
Personally, I would have welcomed COVID vaccine passports. We know that the virus spreads best in enclosed, poorly ventilated spaces where lots of people are gathering, and that's exactly the sort of places that it was originally being proposed that the passports would be used. So I think they could have been a useful tool in helping to stop the transmission further, particularly in those younger age groups.
Downing Street say that vaccine passports are being kept in reserve by ministers here as a potential option if the COVID situation worsens in the coming months. Tomorrow, the UK government are due to set out their plan for the winter in England. We're told they're not considering further lockdowns, but it is reported that they could bring back compulsory mask wearing or working from home if the situation does worsen, if there is a surge in infections. There's also a question about whether all over 50 should get a booster jab or whether that should just be for those considered clinically vulnerable.
Yeah, Tom, a lot of us are waiting to find out exactly what it's going to mean for our age group, not least of all teenagers. There's been an update this afternoon on vaccinations for them.
That's right, Ian. 16 and 17-year-olds have already been offered vaccination, as well as children with health conditions. So this is about those aged between 12 and 15 who are healthy. This afternoon, the chief medical officers from all 4 UK nations have jointly said that they believe these children should be offered a dose of a vaccine. They say their decision takes into account the pandemic's disruption on their education and their mental health. And it's very likely now that governments on both sides of the border, in our case, will accept their recommendation. We then expect that vaccination will happen in schools, with parents and the children themselves ultimately asked to decide if they want to have a jab.
Tom Sheldrick at Westminster, thank you.
Well, staying with politics, but switching from Westminster to Scotland now, Nicola Sturgeon has said her party has an unarguable mandate to hold a second independence referendum by the end of 2023. The First Minister told the Scottish National Party virtual conference the time for Scotland to make a decision was fast approaching.
And we are joined from Edinburgh by our political editor, Peter McMahon, who was watching the speech. Peter, Nicola Sturgeon there has outlined the timetable. Is she going to be able to deliver on her promise to her party?
Well, that, of course, is the big question, Ian. This was a rather subdued speech because it was virtual. There weren't the usual standing ovations for the First Minister. There was a highly political attack on Boris Johnson over asylum seekers and reducing universal credit, which you would expect from a party conference. But the crucial point was when she argued that because the SNP had won the Scottish election, they now had the right to do what she said they promised the Scottish people to do, and that is to go ahead with a second independence referendum. And here's how she described it.
So we must decide who should be making those decisions, people here in Scotland or governments we don't vote for at Westminster. That is the choice we intend to offer the Scottish people in a legal referendum within this term of Parliament, COVID permitting, by the end of 2023. I hope the Scottish and UK governments can reach agreement, as we did in 2014, to allow the democratic wishes of the people of Scotland to be heard and respected. But this much is clear: democracy must and democracy will prevail.
And that's where it becomes contentious. The last referendum was legal because Westminster gave legal consent. If they don't this time around, the timetable could stretch. It could be that there would be a challenge of a referendum proposed by the SNP in the UK Supreme Court. And no one knows where that would end up, and no one knows what that would do with Nicola Sturgeon's proposed timetable.
Clock's ticking on that one, Peter, as it is for us. So very, very briefly, what is the UK government saying in response to the First Minister's latest demand for this second independence referendum?
They don't want to engage on timetables and possible court action. They say polls suggest the Scottish people don't want a referendum anytime soon. One source said to me, it's not Boris Johnson that's saying no to the Scottish government, it's the Scottish people.
Peter McMahon, as always, thank you very much indeed. A national campaign has started to raise awareness of the dangers of undiagnosed and uncontrolled high blood pressure.
Know Your Numbers Week is encouraging people to check their readings and to seek medical advice if it's putting them at greater risk of heart attacks and strokes. Ryan Dollard reports.
Paul Kendall had no symptoms and no suspicions, but his blood pressure was a ticking time bomb waiting to go off. Then, in 2010, he had the stroke that was to change his life forever.
It was a huge shock, and it changed my life because I wasn't able to work after it. I lost my cognitive abilities to advise people. I was an accountant, and I used to advise people on tax and accounts, and I had such a muddled brain afterwards that I wasn't able to carry on.
Jeff Fell knows only too well the dangers of high blood pressure. His father had a stroke that left him needing constant care until the day he died. A simple home checkup last year saved Jeff from potentially suffering the same fate.
My blood pressure was 220 over 120 when I was admitted into hospital, and I did not feel any symptoms whatsoever. I didn't have the droopy face, I didn't have problems with my speech. I was perfectly normal, or I felt perfectly normal inside, and of course that wasn't the case. And that's the frightening thing about it. They call it the silent killer, and that's exactly what it is. You can have no symptoms whatsoever, and suddenly, before you know it, you'll have a full-blown stroke or a heart attack.
Checks are simple and can be done at home or by a GP. And while treatments for strokes and heart attacks are improving, prevention is still a better option than hoping for a cure. Ryan Dollard, ITV News.
A little earlier, I spoke to our resident GP, Dr. Ajay Bedi, to find out a bit more about how high blood pressure can lead to serious health problems, as we've just heard, such as strokes and heart disease. Ajay, thank you so much for your time. Let's start by saying that it is important to note that strokes can happen for lots of different reasons, can't they? But high blood pressure can be a cause of a stroke, and therefore that's the importance of really trying to keep it as low as possible.
Well, absolutely, Amy. Yeah, you're right. In general, there are two different types of stroke. There's a stroke where you get a clot that blocks a blood vessel to the brain and decreases the oxygen supply. And then there's another type where the blood vessel bursts, if you like. And the latter, high blood pressure, is the commonest contributing factor. So you're absolutely correct in what you say. It's really important to monitor it and keep it as low as possible.
How might you know if your blood pressure is too high, Ajay? What might the signs and the symptoms be, things you could look out for?
Great question. The symptoms can be extremely variable, Amy, and very sort of nondescript. So some people will say they've had a pounding head. Other people say that they just feel tired or they feel a little bit lightheaded or dizzy. But actually, for the vast majority of people, they don't get any symptoms at all. And often the first time that somebody finds out that they've got high blood pressure is when the blood pressure is being checked for another reason or in a health check. So you can have absolutely no symptoms at all, which obviously is quite worrying and therefore places a great deal of emphasis on monitoring.
Absolutely, and that was going to be my next question. Can you monitor it at home? Because I think most of us would have had it done at the doctors at some point as, specific health check or just a routine health check. But is it advisable to do it at home? Can you do it yourself?
Absolutely. In fact, there's lots of evidence to show that it's better done in the home environment because one tends to be a little bit relaxed and there's this thing called white coat high blood pressure where people's blood pressure can go artificially high just because they're in with a doctor and in a strange situation, and they might not even be nervous. So lots of evidence to show that actually, yes, it can be done at home. I think it's really important to get yourself a good quality kit. Make sure that it's kind of kept up to date and that it's serviced regularly. And your pharmacist can help you with that. And obviously that takes the pressure off the NHS as well.
And just finally, Ajay, I guess the most important question is how can you keep your blood pressure down? Is it lifestyle? Is it medication? Is it going to be a mix of two for some people?
Yeah, well, it's definitely a mix of two. For some people, because genetics is a big driver of high blood pressure, there can be nothing that you can do to actually stop the cause of stop blood pressure coming on. But you can reduce your risk by keeping your weight under control, not smoking, making sure that you live a healthy lifestyle, get enough sleep, get enough exercise, all the usual sorts of things that we would mention in a healthy lifestyle. But in some cases, you've got to go to medication.
Great advice as always, Ajay. We thank you for your time. You take care. Thank you.
You too, Amy. Thanks a lot.
Now, the eyes of the cycling world have been focused on our region in recent days, thanks to the Tour of Britain.
Yes, some of the sport's top riders took to the streets of Cumbria and the Scottish borders on Friday and Saturday, where they were cheered on by thousands of spectators.
And this increased interest in cycling is now big business. According to the latest figures, cycling tourism is worth £360 million a year to the Scottish economy, with the Borderlands a particularly popular destination. Here's Sandy McCracken.
The best way to find out about cycle tourism is to get on a bike myself. So I've headed to the grand surroundings of Drumlanrig, already famous for its off-road mountain bike trails, to meet Esther and Warren, who run the award-winning Galloway Cycle Holidays. They first took on the business 3 years ago, and as well as planning routes, they also book accommodation and hire out bikes if needed. In doing so, they bring their own experiences and enthusiasm for bike touring, which has taken them on many adventures.
We actually toured around the world for 4 years on a bike.
Yeah, life-changing.
Left everything behind and went around the world for 4 years,
yeah.
Which is kind of a degree course in looking after yourself and reinventing yourself almost on a daily basis. Came back from that. We didn't really fit back in Edinburgh and really enjoyed this area, yeah. And came down here to live, primarily because of the bicycle opportunities here.
I mean, for us, it's a way of living, it's a lifestyle, but we are just so passionate about the beauty that is here and the potential that it has. We've seen on the road a lovely saying, 4 wheels move the body and 2 wheels move the soul. This is what this area is about, and cycling as well.
I'm leaving Esther and Warren and heading to Thornhill to meet the owner of a business that's welcomed more biking visitors, the Nithbank Country Estate Guesthouse.
A lot of guests that visit will say that they've not experienced cycling like they will experience in Dumfries and Galloway because it's so beautiful, it's so dramatic and it's really quiet. So you can go down the lanes and the routes and not actually see anybody. So you get to experience nature all around you without anybody else. So I think in that respect, it really is quite a unique destination.
Dumfries-born Ross Anderson has been into cycling since he was a boy and has travelled the world riding and fixing bikes. What started off as a bike shop with a coffee machine on the side soon grew into a fully fledged cafe. Last year saw a £1 billion increase in UK cycle sales, something that Ross has noticed even in Dumfries.
It's huge nowadays. We can't get bikes anymore. The shelves are looking a bit empty. We do a lot of repairs, that's what's kind of saved us through it. But the bike industry is like 400% up from where it used to be. I'm needing to order bikes 4 years in advance, which is never heard of. Generally speaking, I could order you a bike for next week, but now I need to place orders way in advance.
And viewers in Scotland can see more of that report in tonight's Border Life. That's at 8 o'clock.
The ITV Evening News continues after us with your national and international headlines.
Coming up on the programme, COVID jabs approved for 12 to 15-year-olds. The UK's chief medical officers made the recommendations to try to cut disruption to schools. We'll have the details and reaction. Also had a crucial court hearing for Prince Andrew over accusations of sexual assault 20 years ago. Do join me for those stories and more at 6:30.
Time now to round up a busy weekend of sports action.
For the love of the game. eBay sponsors ITV Regional Sports Reports.
Carlisle United slipped to a second defeat in 3 games away at Crawley on Saturday.
In Scotland, Queen of the South moved up to 5th in the championship table. They beat Wraith Rovers 1-0 on Saturday, but it was defeats for both our Scottish League 2 sides, with Allen Athletic losing 2-1 to Stenhousemuir and Stranraer ending up on the wrong end of a 1-0 result against Edinburgh City.
Rugby League and Whitehaven secured their 8th successive championship win during an emotional afternoon at the LEL Arena yesterday. Haven ran in 3 tries to see off Halifax Panthers by 19 points to 6. The fixture was Papua New Guinean crowd favourite Jessie Jo Parker's final home match after 8 seasons with the club. Meanwhile, League 1 Workington Town lost 32-14 against Hunslet.
On to rugby union now. There were celebrations in the Southern Knights camp yesterday as the team from Melrose moved back to the top of the Super 6 table.
With highlights from that match and the rest of the Borders Rugby Roundup, here's Stuart Cameron.
In National 1, Gala lost at Ayr, but Melrose beat Boroughmuir 36-0 on the road, while Kelso hammered Highland 43-3 to top the table. Stuart Cameron, ITV News.
Staying with rugby union, and viewers in Scotland can see the latest episode of our Border Sport in Focus series at 10:45 tonight here on ITV.
It's a celebration of the life and career of one of the game's all-time greats. Jim Telfer, the former Melrose, Scotland and British and Irish Lions player and coach, is still as enthusiastic as ever.
A lot of people say, oh, the amateur days were the great days and so on. We played at the best time and we involved in rugby at the best time. I don't agree with that. I'm not saying it wasn't a great time, but the rugby is, to me, at the top level now, is of far higher quality than it was when I was coaching and playing.
Now, nearly 60,000 people, including many from across Cumbria and southern Scotland, took part in the Great North Run yesterday. The world's biggest half marathon celebrated its 40th anniversary. Last year's event, of course, was cancelled due to the pandemic. Well, Amy and I were among those running, and it would be fair to say we are feeling the effects today. There's me being cheered on by my mum and dad for the final mile. Great to see them.
And there was no one cheering me on, so I took a picture myself, except all the amazing crowds and volunteers. It was good running conditions. Here's Emma with today's weather.
Now that is brew weather.
And only boiling what she needs.
United Utilities sponsors ITV Border Weather.
Big up you, sis.
Hello there, very good evening to you, and I hope you've had a good day as we move forward into this new week. It's looking a lot cooler than it was last week. However, when I say cooler, still low 20s, so just maybe more comfortable than it was last week. And we've had some spectacular pictures from around the region today. I do love looking at your photos, and the new week is going to be quite changeable. There will be some heavy rain at times, but also it will feel quite pleasant in any sunnier slots, and we should see the best of those out of all of the north of England and south of Scotland. So taking a closer look at the next few hours, this low pressure is going to move up overnight tonight and into tomorrow with a lot of heavy rain on that. Not too much of that affecting our part of the world though. Then high pressure nibbles in for Wednesday and Thursday. Thursday the best day of the week I think. And then this bad boy out to the west, this frontal system which is going to cross on Friday, giving us quite a miserable day, and it will be quite wet as well, but the timing on that uncertain at the moment. We'll keep you posted though. Still a few days off obviously. Over the next few hours into the overnight period, quite a bit of light rain and drizzle around as you can see. It's going to be quite a misty night in places as well. Temperatures 12 or 13 Celsius at lowest. Some would say that's a bit uncomfortable for sleeping. And then tomorrow, once all that has moved away and any mist and fog has lifted, there is a chance of some good sunny spells around, and temperatures may be slightly up on today's values as well, 18 or 19, that's 66 Fahrenheit. Wednesday could start off a little bit misty and foggy in places, but then it's going to brighten from the west, so an improving situation west to east with the best of the sunshine to the west of the region. Thursday, the finest day of the week. For Friday, that system crosses, and so like I say, it will be pretty miserable for much of the day. Temperatures though fairly consistent around 18 or 19 Celsius. That's it. Bye-bye.
United Utilities sponsors ITV Border Weather.
2 sugars, please.
Oh, lovely.
And hopefully if you earned yours yesterday, you're wearing it with pride as well. The national and the international news is next.
I'll see you for the update at 10:30 if I am still awake. I am absolutely shattered.
Me too.
Bye-bye.